Ding, ding. Almost time for round two of the press preview when we have a look at what's in the morning's papers. And it is going to be very exciting with Michael and Christina in just a minute. Well, it will be.
It will be. Brexit.
What's on the list? Have we got Brexit on this list?
No, we're going to keep off. We're going to talk about Vicky's tea parties.
Well, yeah, we have
be spicy no matter what.
Donald Trump is there, so it'll get a bit exciting. Before we do that, before we launch into that, let's just run through the top stories for you. And Labour's been told to rally around Jeremy Corbyn despite that historic and humiliating defeat in the Copeland by-election this week. Motorists are being warned to reconsider buying a diesel car as a study reveals children in London are routinely breathing in toxic levels of air pollution. And Hollywood stars have been protesting against Donald Trump ahead of tomorrow night's Oscars. So this is a press preview here on Sky News, and joining us tonight, the writer and columnist Christina Patterson, and former advisor to Nigel Farage and the co-owner of the website Westmonster, Michael Heaver. Evening to you both. Morning. It's nearly morning, to be fair. I'm not far out. I'm only half an hour out. Before we have a chat, let's just run through the front pages. So the Sunday Times says the government is planning to limit benefits paid to new migrants coming into the UK. The Sunday Telegraph says Britain's terrorism watchdog is warning that the terror threat is at a level not seen since the days of the IRA in the 70s, and that's down to Islamic extremism. Sunday Times for you says Ian Stewart, who murdered his fiancée, the author Helen Bailey, had a Jekyll and Hyde personality and a volcanic temper. Daily Star Sunday says Martin Kemp faces a backlash about an alleged drugs confession, and the Sunday People is celebrating a teenager getting a life-saving drug thanks to its readers. So let's get things underway with Christina and with Michael. No pressure, no pressure. Let's start with the front of the Sunday Times, looking at Labour. Parties facing a wipeout?
Well, I mean, you know...
It's not what Tom Watson really said, is it?
It's been going on for so long. The surprise is that people even bother to talk about it, really. I mean, it's as if it's news that people think Jeremy Corbyn should go. The party's been unelectable from the moment he took over. And then, unfortunately, Ed Miliband stitched up the Labour Party so that there is now, you know, I say we, I'm not a member of the Labour Party, there is a membership of, you know, far-left loonies. And unfortunately, they seem to want to vote for any old dinosaur that will, you know, shift the party right back to Stalin. So it's not looking good.
Or it could be argued a party with, you know, it's got the highest membership, I think, of any political party now. Real, ordinary people having their say, and they like
great.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Of course, and it's fantastic. And obviously, they're not going to be elected in 6 million years, as we've seen. If you can lose a seat that has been safe since 1915, apart from a tiny blip in the 1930s or something, really, this is quite dramatic stuff. The thing that amuses me about it is the hours people spend analysing all this as if it's a really complicated problem. I mean, you know, politics now is complicated in that you could argue it's more about globalisation versus nationalism than, you know, tribal loyalties. But of course Corbyn has to go. I mean, all these sort of coded messages if it's a big deal, and the guy is not going to go until, I don't know what's going to happen, but he clearly thinks that God has put him in his position and he's going to stay there forever and ever and ever.
I wonder, Michael, if you might come to Jeremy Corbyn's defence. Which is no, but only in the sense that he is where he is because real people, fed up with the so-called Westminster bubble and all that, had their say, joined in their droves and had their say. This is about real people and what they wanted in the Labour Party.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's absolutely true. The reason that Jeremy Corbyn won was because the system by which the Labour leader was elected became much more democratised, and, you know, it was a mass movement and all the rest of it. But I think the real issue here is the fact that Labour Party now, it's hard to see how it will go back to not being basically a far-left party. You know, the cycle of destruction, I think, is complete, because even if Corbyn did stand down, who will replace him? Who will the membership vote for? The Corbynistas are not going to go and vote for a, you know, so-called centrist candidate or a Blairite. No. They're going to probably vote for someone like Clive Lewis, I would imagine, who's, you know, a lot of his opinions are very similar. They may dress it up differently. And I think really that looking longer term now, the only real option that people like Chuka Umunna and others may have in the Labour Party is I think they'll have to eventually split. Because I don't see how they can continue in this party longer term. They're not going to change the direction of the party. And I think in terms of the UKIP threat, I mean, you know, the opportunity is there. It's absolutely massive. Obviously, Stoke, UKIP was hoping to win, didn't manage to do it. But just thinking longer term now, you know, my great suspicion is that a lot of people at home won't have taken a serious look at Jeremy Corbyn as potential Prime Minister yet, because obviously a lot of people engage late on in sort of a general election campaign. And when they do, if Corbyn is the man in the Prime Ministerial debates, I think very, very few people, you know, including current Labour voters, will look at this man and think he's Prime Minister material.
And they're going to go for Paul Nuttall? I mean, really?
I think so, yeah,
But
absolutely.
it's interesting because you said earlier on, and we've heard from other people in UKIP as well, saying, you know, the key to UKIP now is to be revolutionary. You've got to be like a revolutionary party, which is exactly what you're saying about Labour, only revolutionary to the left.
OK, but, I mean, this is the same argument as sort of saying Twitter's a big talking chamber that reflects public opinion. The trouble is with Labour, it is sort of got a big membership, but it's basically an echo chamber. It's lots of people agreeing with each other from within, but not actually having huge, wide appeal in the country anymore.
But, sorry, you've just contradicted yourself, because on the one hand you said there was this fantastic sort of revolution with real people as opposed to the plastic people like me, who are presumably part of some metropolitan elite, which obviously makes us unqualified to vote in some way or indeed have any opinions on anything.
But
these real people who are, I think, according to the research they've done, kind of sort of archetypally, a 27-year-old charity worker from Islington who's a vegan. That's kind of your classic profile for a Labour Party member now. And they're all very keen on Corbyn, and, you know, lovely. It's just unfortunate that they weren't around in 1982 when, you know, Michael Foot wrecked the Labour Party. But the idea, you know, a minute ago you said it was this great revolution, and now you're saying do you want protest or do you want policy? Because what UKIP doesn't have, and what Labour also doesn't have, by the way, is proper answers for how you do the unbelievably complicated balancing act of producing legislation that delivers what people need, which is functioning schools, functioning hospitals, a system that has fair taxation. This is complicated stuff. Protest doesn't bring that about. And as far as I can tell, UKIP don't have any policies. Labour have no policies.
They had a full costed manifesto. So did you not read it? Of course they've got policies. Look, the point is with Labour anyway, bring it back to Labour. The point is with Labour is that they are going to become a mass movement party, but in London. If you look at their membership and their constituencies that are now strong for them, they're massively focused on London. And the danger that they've got is that the Corbyn appeal is in quite, you know, metropolitan-type areas in some of the big cities, massively focused on London with people like Diane Abbott on the front line, but it doesn't speak to the country at large. And that's the real problem they've got. And that's, I think, the UKIP opportunity in the north, in the Midlands, and in working-class areas in the south of England.
OK. Well, it's one of those things where, in a sense, we're going to have to wait and see till the next general election, isn't it? When that comes, though, it's going to be interesting whether the PM can be persuaded to call one a little bit early. I'm sort of itching for another general election, really. It's very exciting for us.
That's because of your job.
It's great fun for us, but whether that will happen, I don't know. Now, Shami Chakrabarti.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God.
What
can one say? I'm afraid I think we might actually agree on this one. It'll be very boring. We can only apologise in advance that we might agree on this. I'm sorry, but Shami Chakrabarti is possibly the most irritating person in the country, I think.
That's a big claim.
She has actually said that she thinks... When somebody mentioned that they are thinking of taking mobile phones away from prisoners because, you know, funnily enough, a lot of crime goes on in prisons, a lot of it is drug-related, and that people use these things called smartphones to do that. And she said, excuse me, this might be a bit naive, but wouldn't that be infringing their human rights? And you think this person who is very close to Corbyn and apparently a key mover and shaker in Labour now, that's the level of thinking. Well, you're not going to exactly get people to vote for you if you are seriously thinking, oh, we can't possibly interfere with the rights of prisoners to have drug runs in their prisons or, you know, get drones in and dropping their drugs off. It's absolutely crazy.
I mean, the alarming thing for me with the justice system now, I mean, I'm a big believer that prison has to be a deterrent. And we see so many of these videos now, and we've seen riots as well, increasing number of riots, and prison officers at breaking point. For me, prisons are now just far too soft. We see these videos where people have mobile phones, you know, they're eating McDonald's, they're taking drugs, they've got music on in the background. I mean, it looks like a hostel at times. And if that's your experience of going into prison, it's not exactly going to massively stop you going back in.
It doesn't work as a deterrent. And I do think Liz Truss is absolutely right to try and have a real reform agenda now, because our prisons are a disaster. I mean, you can want it to be a deterrent as much as you like.
Is it Denmark or is it Sweden where the prison system changed about 10 years ago and they've they've now, is it Netherlands? Someone's saying Netherlands in my ear, which it could well be, but one of those countries where, and they've actually, the prison population has been cut dramatically as a result of all of this, because people aren't reoffending and the whole system just seems to be working a lot better.
I'm half Swedish, and normally Sweden, but I don't know whether it is Sweden in this situation. Sweden's always the model of everything that's marvellous. I don't know, but we do know that as it exists, the prison system with very, very overcrowded prisons, it's a disaster. Reoffending rates are extremely high. It costs the taxpayer a lot of money, and there's an enormous amount of crime going on in prisons.
But if you've got a cushy system inside a prison, it's not a
cushy,
deterrent to reoffend, is it? Well, I've seen the videos.
No,
they're taking drugs, they're dancing around.
No, they're not. I've been in prisons.
There's lots of videos of prisoners now basically having a laugh, and those, of course, they're not. They're just going to think, well, what's prison? Let's just have a laugh.
They're not cushy.
Muck about my mates.
There was certainly in one of the riots, a lot of the footage that came out was from prisoners recording it on their own mobile phones.
They didn't exactly look unhappy, did they? They were jumping around smiling.
Well, that's why you need to get rid of
I've never been inside a prison, actually.
It's pretty unpleasant.
I can't comment on it.
They seem to be having a great time.
I should put a word of defence in for Shami Chakrabarti, because she's getting a lot of stick. I did see her speak. I went to an event where she was speaking when she was head of Liberty, and I said she was very, very good. And I've interviewed her many times within that role here, and she was great. But what she's
I don't listen. I think she did lots of good stuff at Liberty, but she is unbelievably sanctimonious, I'm afraid, I think.
And doesn't this just sort of sum up the type of people around Corbyn? Just soft, completely out of touch with Labour voters. They'll be horrified by this type of stuff. Well, and these are the people now leading Labour.
I don't think there are any Labour voters.
Well, I know in your argument, as you said before, would be, well, they'll go to UKIP. Maybe not. Maybe they won't go to UKIP because Nigel's fed up with them. Your biggest donor is fed up with UKIP, apparently.
Well, the word that springs to mind is omni-shambles of UKIP, I'm afraid. If they have any policies, they're not apparent to people like me, and I do spend a lot of time, kind of trying to keep up with this stuff. I don't know what they're for anymore. They've got a serial fantasist as their leader who can't even win a seat in a constituency where the vast majority of people voted for Brexit. It seems to be one lie after another unravelling.
That should have been a shoo-in.
Of course
that should have been a shoo-in.
Of course it shouldn't. Omnishambles.
No, I think people say that from outside the political process. If you understand how these things work, the great advantage that parties like Labour and Conservatives have in an area like Stoke is they will have historic data of where their voters are. The problem is UKIP's always starting from a standing start. It has to go and find where its voters are and then turn them out. So this isn't a problem with organisation and structure and money and all the rest of it. And I think, Nigel and Aaron are perfectly entitled to have their say. They're very influential people in the party that want to see it do well. And I think, UKIP's potential is huge, as I said. The immigration issue, I think at the moment everyone's overlooking. We had David Davis, as Brexit Secretary, say that the Tory policy post-Brexit may basically be to continue mass EU migration, and I think there'll be huge anger out there in the country. The main reason that Leave won was the immigration issue. People want to see tens of thousands at least net migration, as David Cameron promised. And if the Tories don't deliver, and of course Theresa May as Home Secretary had a horrendous record on this, made lots of good speeches, sounded great, but the numbers never changed, they kept going up, then I think that's the UKIP opportunity by 2020.
So just to be clear, the key, because I can't work out what UKIP's for, we're getting Brexit, which is obviously wonderful.
Although Lord Hasseltine's trying to block it.
So are you, yes, thank God, are you saying that the key thing now is just make sure no foreigners come in?
Oh, that's absolutely ridiculous. This is the reason
you mentioned immigration.
This is absolutely ridiculous. To suggest that people that want to have a serious control of migration down to sensible levels so that infrastructure planning can go ahead so that we know how many... Can I just finish? So we know how many people are coming in each year is not the same as saying, I hate foreigners, I don't want anyone to come in. Yes, you did. You said the policy for UKIP is to not let any foreigners in.
It was about hating foreigners.
Ridiculous to stop them coming in. It's about limiting migration.
Sorry, but...
like a country like Australia or America.
What is it? Immigrants are people who come from abroad, therefore they are foreigners. Why is it wrong to call them foreigners?
But you're acting like just slamming the door or having open-door migration are the only two...
No, I'm not pro-open-door migration. How many would you say...
UKIP's the only party that campaigned against it. All the other parties were for it. So you agree with the UKIP policy?
You're putting words in my mouth. When did I say I was pro-immigration? I didn't say I was pro-immigration. I'm simply asking you what UKIP's policy is. You seem to say it was about immigration. So my next question
that's one of the policies.
So my next question would be exactly how many immigrants will you allow in and from where?
Well, the point is, I'm not the government, of course. I've got my own opinion.
No, I'm talking about UKIP. UKIP's policy.
Well, UKIP's policy is that the government can control it and decide. And that ultimately is the important part. Remember, none of the other parties wanted to have a policy whereby the government can control. That's why we're seeing a housing crisis. That's why we're seeing a hospital crisis. Because the government can't plan how many people are coming in each year. They couldn't ever plan infrastructure. They had no control over that. David Cameron said tens of thousands, then it went up to 330,000 net a year. It's absolutely ridiculous. We had an impotent government, impotent Prime Minister, and now what UKIP's got to do is push and say, we want the tens of thousands net migration as Cameron promised.
Well, I don't know how the economy is going to function in light of that, but the point
because
is
British workers will do
we
the
just
jobs.
agreed to wreck our economic future in order to limit immigration, which
Who
is,
did?
you know, fine. Apparently,
Who did?
52% of the country who voted.
So you
to
think
leave the
52% of the population is stupid enough to vote for economic self-harm?
Yes,
Is that what
I
you're
do.
saying?
Absolutely, yeah.
So you think that little of the British people?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, look, on that note, again, I wish I could keep it going, but we've got to go to a break. Well, calm down. Actually, we can't talk about Jamaican stew, which I was going to suggest I was going to suggest that we could have that to calm down in the break.
Sure.
Maybe we'll squeeze it in just a couple of minutes. Stay with us. So we're looking through the papers with Christina and with Michael. Let's talk something simple, something non-controversial. Donald Trump.
Yay!
He's keeping the Oscars spirit alive, according to the Mail on Sunday.
Yes, although apparently they're saying he will save the Oscars because the Oscar viewing figures have gone down because, well, for whatever reasons, and obviously pretty much everyone in Hollywood is planning to give some great speech, anti-Trump speech. What will be interesting, actually, will be to see how they do it, whether they actually use his name or whether they do something a bit more subtle and interesting than that. So from that point of view, it could be quite entertaining.
If everybody does it, though,
oh yeah, no,
then it won't be great, will it?
No, not if everybody does it. I think the question is that these are actors, clearly, and they are very good actors, which is why they're being nominated for Oscars. So obviously some of the people are not actors, and it will be interesting to see if they can say anything that actually presents an interesting argument rather than just a rant, or if they can do something artistically interesting in the process. For me, that's what would be interesting about the whole thing. Just to say Donald Trump is a nightmare, which of course he is not going to be particularly interesting. I know you're a big fan, so
absolutely.
yes,
I just think, you know, it's a complete lack of self-awareness, I think, for this sort of preachy attitude that, you know, a lot of Hollywood's rich and famous campaigned against Trump before the election. They stood on platforms with Hillary Clinton and, you know, they didn't have the perception then to see how bad that looked. Rich people siding with Hillary Clinton against the concerns of ordinary Americans. And yet they're doing it again. I mean, the problem is, this isn't a political rally. Why do they think all these people that basically attacked Trump before the election are now doing it after? Why do they think anyone's interested in what they're going to say? They don't understand, in my opinion, they don't understand now the country that they are now within, because the average American can see the problems of mass migration. They can see the problems of having weak borders. They want a president who's patriotic, who wants to put America first. And these guys sort of sneer at it.
Well, at the moment, Trump has pretty much the lowest ratings of any president so far, and at this point in their term. And there was a poll today that shows, I think, about 58% of Americans are really embarrassed by their government. So it's not as though the majority of Americans are currently supporting him. But putting that
are those all the polls that said Trump would lose?
But putting that to one side, can I just ask you, do you think that rich people, because obviously you're good mates with Aaron Banks, who is a co-funder of your website and obviously bankrolls UKIP, you seem to speak as if you think rich people have less right to have a political judgment than poor people. Is that right?
No, I think basically it just looks terrible, the fact they're doing this at an award ceremony.
Looks terrible to whom?
Well, to ordinary people sat at home thinking, who the hell are these people who don't understand the neighbourhood? Well, if they were loving it, they would all go and listen to these people and voted for Hillary Clinton, and they obviously didn't.
They did all vote for Hillary Clinton. It was the electoral colleges who voted against.
Yeah, and that's how you become president.
Yes,
so Trump won the election.
I know, but it was the people who voted for Clinton.
Yet again, it's the great and the good looking down their noses, saying we know best. Well, then then there's no self-reflection. Then none of these people, none of these people are looking and saying, actually, why are people voting for Trump? Why has this happened?
How do you...
what is the country, the direction of the country now? No, they're just dismissing it. It's wrong, Trump's an idiot, that's it. It's very simplistic
Number one,
thinking.
excuse me, isn't it rather patronising to say these people are not doing any self-reflection? How on earth do you know what's going on in their heads? They may well have been reflecting for nothing else since November the 8th as to why the American people voted for Donald Trump.
But they're saying the same now as they did before.
But on the richness front, Trump has got the cabinet, the richest cabinet in American history. It is pretty much all millionaires and billionaires. So what's going on there? I mean, if you're so keen on the ordinary people who don't have any money, why are you so keen on a billionaire president who has a billionaire cabinet?
So is it of your opinion then that a billionaire can't represent ordinary people? Because they obviously disagree, because they went out and voted for him. The fact is, Trump is disrupting the entire political system. It's part of Brexit, a global revolution we're now seeing. And I think it's incredibly exciting. And I think the fact that these celebs, sadly, aren't part of that excitement shows how out of touch they are. I think there's huge optimism now going through the West, in the UK, in America, because of Trump and Brexit. And I think it's going to be amazing and great.
Do you know, well, look, we're out of time. We're out of time. I've had very little to say, which has been lovely. And we can't talk about our young people and their views on affairs, which is going to have to wait. It's been good to see you both. Thank you very much indeed. Let's have a quick look at the weather.